When death comes, which it will for all of us, what happens? Is it like switching off a light, or does something continue?
A really important question to ask is, does consciousness continue after death? We don't understand consciousness. We don't understand when it is created and when it ends.
We tend to focus that consciousness is just the mind, and it's not. It's the whole body. Animals know this, right? Animals know all about body. Animals are much more intuitive about the future, I think, because of the body. The information involves the body, not just the mind.
The strongest case of the near-death experience I had during my research was patient 10. And when I interviewed this patient, he described leaving his body, and he described going through the ceiling. So he was higher than the ceiling, and it's as if the ceiling disappeared. And he looked down and he could see what we were doing to him.
It feels like we're given an opportunity to have one foot left here in our humanness and our human world, and we have one foot in wherever we're going to go, and I don't know where that is. And then when we're ready, we die. And I think that's incredibly loving.
Now, as physics has advanced, we see many ways in which we understand that our common sense way of experiencing the world is a very thin slice of physical reality.
It feels as though consciousness is the final frontier of science. What is it? Where is it? If I ask you to picture your childhood home, and now you're picturing it in all its glory, where is that image? It's not in your head. Where are these images held? Where is consciousness? How did you just bring that up? Where did it come from?
Death isn't just about the person who is dying. It affects all of us, loved ones and caregivers alike. Is it possible to see death in the context of living? How can our final days become an event for the living as well as the dying?
A good death is different for everyone. I think a good death means that people were able to communicate what they needed to communicate, that the family members were able to communicate what they needed to communicate, so there was closure, and that they weren't in agony, they weren't suffering. So a good death to me usually means manage suffering, and everyone feels like the story was closed, that the storybook closed, and that the timing's right.
With my grandmother, she didn't want any surgical intervention at all. It was really quite strange, because when I'd phone up for the doctors for some advice about her care, if her condition was deteriorating, they were very much so, but she can have this operated on, why didn't you take her into hospital? I can arrange for that, for an operation. And we were like, no, she's made this decision. She wants to have her last days at home like this with no surgical intervention.
There was one gentleman, the only thing he wanted before he died was take a ride on the fire truck that he had worked on his whole life. So we got, them over there to do that. So it's a very different focus. Instead of saying, how can we keep you alive for another week? What can we put into your body to keep you alive for another week? It's much more, how can we help close this book and make you comfortable? And through that, people live longer.
I think one of the most important thing about how to talk to the dying is listening. So many dying people are so afraid to say anything because they're afraid that whoever they're talking will come back and say, oh, don't talk like that, or don't say that. Oh, but you'll be all right. Oh, have some supper. It's that kind of language to shut them up and go, well, we don't want to talk about that.
And there's absolutely no doubt about it that if you die in hospital, the nurses in hospital, the doctors in hospital are there to preserve life. And it's difficult for them to change and recognize that you're going to die. This needs a different sort of care completely from that of a busy nurse coming in, making you tidy and getting you ready to go to some terribly painful physiotherapy or whatever. It's different. And so therefore special places where people die is extremely good. And there are two special places. One is hospices, and the second one is home.
It's hard to see the big picture because there's so much we don't know about this last chapter of life. What do we need to know in order to prepare for our death?